Take off the uniform, Grandma. You're embarrassing yourself. Commander Jake Brennan's voice sliced through the Friday night crowd at Coronado's Officers Club like a blade finding flesh. Catherine Morrison's hands trembled as 300 phones rose to capture her humiliation. At 55, she looked fragile standing there, pale blonde hair, small frame, those shaking fingers clutching her glass. She seemed broken already. But in exactly 97 minutes, when they forced her to remove that uniform and reveal the Ghost Trident tattooed across her spine, every person recording would realize they'd just documented the beginning of the military's largest corruption scandal in 40 years. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end of this story. Comment below with your city, so I can see how far this incredible journey reaches. Now let's dive into Catherine's story. Catherine's hands trembled as she clutched her glass of water. Every instinct in the room read her as broken, overwhelmed completely out of her depth. The delicate lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her blonde hair, the way her small frame seemed to shrink under Brennan's towering presence. Everything screamed vulnerability. "I have orders to report here, Commander," Catherine said softly, her voice barely audible over the renewed laughter. "Orders!" Brennan took 3 steps closer, his 6'3" frame deliberately invading her space. His squadron closed ranks behind him, 8 elite SEALs, who'd made a sport of breaking anyone they deemed unworthy. From who? The retirement home, the costume department. Lieutenant Jessica Chen, Brennan's second-in-command, circled Catherine like a shark scenting blood in the water. Her perfectly maintained tactical gear gleamed under the lights, every inch of her appearance designed to intimidate. "Sweetie," Chen's voice dripped with false concern. "This is a military installation. Active duty. Not some community theater production for people reliving their glory days." The crowd pressed closer, phones raised already composing captions for social media. Catherine's trembling intensified. Her gaze dropped to the floor, shoulders hunching inward. But in the shadowy corner booth near the emergency exit, Captain Elena Voss lowered her tablet just enough to observe the unfolding scene with calculating precision. After 18 months of surveillance, Ghost Protocol was finally getting the confirmation they needed. Her fingers moved imperceptibly, activating recording devices concealed throughout the room. What none of them could see, what only the most trained observer would notice, was how Catherine's eyes moved in controlled sweeps, automatically cataloging exits, counting personnel, assessing threat levels. Her feet, despite the apparent trembling, had shifted into a perfect balanced stance. Her breathing remained steady, controlled even as her hands shook. "You know what I think?" Brennan gestured broadly to his audience, playing to the crowd with practiced ease. "I think we've got ourselves a stolen valor situation. Some wannabe wearing a uniform she found at a surplus store trying to feel important for a night." "That's not..." Catherine started, but her voice cracked perfectly, exactly as she'd intended. "Let me guess." Brennan cut her off, his tone shifting to mock sympathy. "You were a nurse, a clerk. Maybe you pushed papers at some recruiting office 30 years ago, and now you think that makes you one of us." Senior Chief Marcus Webb stepped forward from the crowd, his weathered face creased with what might have been genuine concern. At 58, he was one of the few people in the room old enough to recognize something off about this situation. "Commander," Webb said carefully, "maybe we should verify her credentials before..." Before what? Senior Chief Brennan wheeled on him. "Before we hurt her feelings. This is exactly what's wrong with the new military. Everyone's so worried about being sensitive that we've forgotten what standards mean." Catherine's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look at it to know what the message said. Phase 1 confirmed. They took the bait. Proceed to Phase 2. Ghost Command. "Commander Brennan is right," Catherine said suddenly, her voice still soft, but with an edge that made several people lean forward. "Standards are everything. Without them, people die." The change in her tone was subtle, but Brennan caught it. His eyes narrowed. "Oh, now you want to lecture me about standards. What do you know about..." "I know that 3 years ago, a 24-year-old SEAL candidate named Maria Morrison drowned during water training at this facility." Catherine interrupted, her voice growing steadier. "I know that her death was ruled a training accident. I know that 6 other female candidates have died under suspicious circumstances in the past 5 years, and I know that every single one of those deaths was covered up. The room went silent. Brennan's confident smirk faltered for just a moment before returning harder than before. "That's classified information," he said slowly. "How would someone like you have access to someone like me?" Catherine raised her head and for the first time made direct eye contact with Brennan. Her blue eyes, which had seemed watery with unshed tears moments ago, were now cold and clear. "You mean someone old? Someone female? Someone who doesn't fit your picture of what a warrior should look like?" Lieutenant Chen moved to flank Catherine from the other side, her hand resting casually on her sidearm. "Ma'am, I think you need to leave before this situation escalates." "I agree," Brennan said. "Security escort this woman off the premises. And someone get her ID so we can file charges for trespassing on a military installation." "I don't think that's going to happen, Commander." The voice came from Captain Voss, who had risen from her corner booth and was walking toward the center of the room with the measured pace of someone who held all the cards. Brennan's face darkened. "Captain Voss, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, Commander, it concerns me very much." Voss stopped beside Catherine, not quite touching her, but clearly positioning herself as an ally. "This woman has every right to be here. Her credentials are impeccable. In fact, they're so impressive that they're classified above your pay grade." "Bullshit," Brennan spat. "Look at her. She's 55 years old," Voss finished calmly. "Stands 5'2", weighs approximately 115 pounds, appears non-threatening. Yes, Commander, I can see. The question is, can you see past appearances to recognize capability?" The crowd was riveted now, sensing something bigger than a simple case of stolen valor unfolding. Brennan's face flushed red. "With all due respect, Captain, this is my jurisdiction. This woman made serious accusations about classified operations, and I want to know how she obtained that information." "Then why don't you ask me yourself, Commander?" Catherine's voice had completely transformed. The trembling was gone. The soft, vulnerable tone had vanished. When she spoke now, it carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life-or-death situations. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Catherine Morrison. Serial number classified. DevGru Gold Squadron retired. Ghost Protocol operations currently active." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Anne Maria Morrison, the candidate who drowned 3 years ago, she was my daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Several phones slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering on the concrete floor. Brennan's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. That's impossible. There's no such thing as DevGru Gold Squadron, and women weren't authorized for SEAL operations until 2016 publicly," Catherine finished. "But there's been a classified program since 1997. 12 operators, all female. All operating under protocols so secret that even most SEAL Command didn't know we existed." She took a step forward, and despite her small stature, despite her age, despite everything about her appearance that had seemed weak moments ago, Brennan took an involuntary step backward. "The program was called Ghost Trident," Catherine continued. "We operated in situations where male operators would be compromised. Middle Eastern households, Asian diplomatic circles, Eastern European trafficking networks. Places where women are invisible, underestimated, dismissed." Lieutenant Chen's hand had fallen away from her sidearm. Her face was pale. "Ghost Trident is a legend, a story senior chiefs tell to scare junior operators into respecting their elders." Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, I've heard the stories too. The woman who infiltrated the Tehran embassy in 2003, the operator who extracted 3 CIA assets from Karachi in 2009, the ghost who eliminated 6 high-value targets in Yemen without anyone knowing she was there." She turned slowly, making eye contact with people throughout the crowd. "Those weren't legends. That was me. That was us." Senior Chief Webb was staring at her with dawning recognition. "The Karachi extraction. I was part of the support team for that operation. We never saw the operator who went in." Command just told us to secure the perimeter and wait. 3 hours later, 3 assets walked out with someone we assumed was a local woman. I never knew. You weren't supposed to know, Catherine said gently. That was the point. We succeeded because no one saw us coming. Because everyone looked at us the same way Commander Brennan looked at me tonight and dismissed us as irrelevant. Brennan had regained some of his composure, though his face was still flushed. Even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying I believe it, that doesn't explain what you're doing here, or how you have information about classified training incidents. Doesn't it? Catherine tilted her head. Commander, do you remember Maria Morrison? I don't recall every candidate who... You were her primary water training instructor. Catherine's voice went cold. She signaled for help 4 times during that dive. 4 times. Protocol requires immediate extraction after 2 signals. You ignored her. You told the safety team she was just being dramatic. And when they finally pulled her out, she'd been underwater for 6 minutes without oxygen. The color drained from Brennan's face. That's not... The investigation cleared me of any... The investigation was a whitewash. Catherine cut him off. Conducted by your friend Colonel Richard Drummond, who happens to have received $200,000 in consulting fees from the same defense contractor that supplies this facility's training equipment. Equipment that has failed safety inspections 3 times in the past 5 years. Equipment that Colonel Drummond keeps certifying as operational. She pulled out her phone and held it up so the screen was visible to the crowd. I've spent 3 years investigating my daughter's death. 3 years building a case. 3 years collecting evidence of systematic safety violations, cover-ups, and corruption. And tonight, in front of 300 witnesses and approximately 87 smartphones currently recording this conversation, you're going to help me prove it. This is insane, Brennan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Captain Voss, I want this woman arrested for... For what, Commander Voss asked calmly. For having credentials that make yours look like a participation trophy. For conducting an authorized investigation into potential criminal activity. For being exactly where she's supposed to be. She pulled out her own phone and held it up. Everything that's happened here tonight has been recorded and simultaneously uploaded to secure DoD servers. Every word, every action, every threat. The Pentagon has been watching this in real time. Brennan's eyes widened. You set this up. This whole thing was, a test, Catherine finished. Ghost Protocol has been investigating corruption in SEAL training programs for 2 years. We've identified 17 personnel involved in cover-ups ranging from harassment to negligent homicide. But we needed proof. We needed to see how deep the rot went. We needed to see who would stand up for what's right and who would choose cruelty over conscience. She looked around the room, her gaze settling on different faces. Tonight, you all had a choice. You could have questioned Commander Brennan's behavior. You could have checked my credentials before mocking me. You could have treated an older woman with basic respect instead of assuming she was weak and irrelevant. Her voice grew harder. Instead, you chose to film my humiliation. You chose to laugh. You chose to participate in the same toxic culture that killed my daughter and 6 other women. And now, all of that is evidence. A young ensign near the back of the crowd, she couldn't have been more than 25, raised her hand hesitantly. Ma'am, I didn't laugh, and I didn't film anything. Does that mean... Catherine's expression softened. What's your name, Ensign? Maya Torres, ma'am. I'm starting SEAL training next month. Ensign Torres, you're going to be just fine. This isn't about punishing everyone in this room. It's about holding accountable the people who created a culture where cruelty is rewarded and conscience is punished. She turned back to Brennan. Commander, you have a choice now. You can continue denying everything, in which case Captain Voss will place you under arrest and will sort this out through a court-martial. Or you can start telling the truth about what really happened to my daughter. Brennan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw worked as he visibly struggled between self-preservation and pride. Finally, he said, I want my lawyer. That's your right, Voss said, pulling out a set of handcuffs. Commander Jake Brennan, You are hereby placed under arrest for negligent homicide, violation of training protocols, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent." "Wait." The voice came from Lieutenant Chen, who had gone very pale. "Wait, I have information about the training incidents, about the cover-ups." Brennan wheeled on her. "Chen, shut your mouth. That's an order." "With all due respect, sir." Chen's voice shook, but remained steady. "I don't think you're in a position to give orders anymore." She turned to Catherine. "I was there the day Maria Morrison died. I was on the safety team. Commander Brennan told us to wait, that she was probably just panicking. But I saw her signals. I knew something was wrong. And Her voice broke. "I didn't speak up. I should have overridden him. I should have pulled her out. But I was afraid of challenging a superior officer." Tears streamed down her face. "I've been carrying that guilt for 3 years, and she wasn't the first. There were others. Training accidents that weren't accidents. Safety violations that got swept under the rug. I kept telling myself it wasn't my place to speak up, that I was just following orders." Catherine studied Chen for a long moment. "Lieutenant, do you understand that what you just said is a confession to criminally negligent homicide?" Chen nodded, her whole body trembling. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. But I can't stay silent anymore. Your daughter deserved better. They all deserved better." "Yes," Catherine said softly. "They did." She looked around the room again. "Anyone else want to get ahead of this? Because Captain Voss has subpoenas for 17 personnel, and they're going to be served tonight. Your choice is whether you face this with some dignity or we drag you out in handcuffs." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, a lieutenant near the bar raised his hand. "I have information about falsified equipment inspections." Another hand went up. "I witnessed harassment that was never reported." A third. "I know about the defense contractor payments." Within 5 minutes, 11 people had stepped forward, each confessing to some piece of the puzzle. Catherine watched them with an expression that mixed satisfaction with profound sadness. Senior Chief Webb approached her slowly, his weathered face creased with shame. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something about the investigation into your daughter's death. I was asked to review the dive records, and I noticed discrepancies in the timing. I reported them to Colonel Drummond, and he told me to revise my report to match the official narrative. He swallowed hard. "I did what he asked. I changed my report, and I've regretted it every day since." Catherine nodded slowly. "Senior Chief, you're going to write down everything you just told me, sign it, and submit it to Captain Voss. Then you're going to spend the rest of your career making sure no one else has to make the choice you made. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Understood." Voss was speaking into her phone, coordinating with the MPs who were beginning to arrive. "We need transport for multiple detainees. Also, someone get Colonel Drummond on the line. Tell him his presence is required immediately." Brennan, still standing in the center of the room, seemed to have aged 10 years in the past 30 minutes. "You've ruined my career, my life. For what revenge?" Catherine stepped close to him, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "My daughter called for help 4 times, Commander. 4 times she trusted you to save her life, and you let her die because you were more concerned with looking tough than being competent. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. There's a difference." She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Here's what's going to happen now. This facility is going on lockdown. Ghost Protocol has authority to conduct a complete review of all training operations. Every incident report from the past 10 years is going to be examined. Every piece of equipment is going to be inspected. Every training instructor is going to be evaluated." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. "This is going to be painful. Careers are going to end. People are going to face criminal charges. But when we're done, this place is going to be safe. Female candidates are going to be able to train without fear of harassment or negligence. And no mother is ever going to stand at Arlington National Cemetery and wonder if her daughter's death could have been prevented." Ensign Torres spoke up again. "Ma'am, what about those of us who start training next month? Are we going to be delayed while you conduct the investigation?" Catherine smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time that evening. No, Ensign, your training will proceed on schedule, but it's going to proceed under new protocols with new instructors and with a level of safety oversight that this facility has never seen before. You're going to train hard. You're going to be pushed to your limits, but you're going to be safe. And you're going to graduate knowing that you earned your Trident through competence, not because someone looked the other way when standards were violated. The MPs had arrived and were beginning to take people into custody. Brennan was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Chen went willingly, her confession having already sealed her fate. Others followed, some defiant, some resigned, all of them facing consequences they had never imagined when they woke up that morning. As the crowd began to disperse, those not being arrested, retreating to barracks and offices to process what they had witnessed, Voss approached Catherine. "That was quite a performance," Voss said quietly. "It wasn't a performance," Catherine replied. "It was a revelation. We needed to see who they really were, and the only way to do that was to make them think I was weak. And now we rebuild. The easy part is over, Elena. What comes next is going to take years." Voss nodded. "The Pentagon has already approved your promotion to captain and given you command of the Reform Task Force. You'll have full authority to implement whatever changes you deem necessary." Catherine looked around the now quiet officers' club, seeing not what it was, but what it could become. "We're going to call it the Morrison Protocol. Every female candidate who trains here is going to know my daughter's name. They're going to know what she sacrificed, and they're going to benefit from the reforms that her death made possible." "That's a fitting memorial," Voss said. "It's not enough. It will never be enough." Catherine's voice cracked for the first time, revealing the grief that she had kept locked away for 3 years. "But it's what I can do. It's how I can make sure Maria's death meant something." Ensign Torres approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, I know this might not be the right time, but thank you for fighting for us, for making this place safer." Catherine studied the young woman, seeing in her face the same determination and idealism that Maria had possessed. "Ensign, when you graduate, and you will graduate, I want you to remember something. Being a SEAL isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most aggressive. It's about having the moral courage to do what's right, even when it costs you everything, especially when it costs you everything." "I'll remember, ma'am." As Torres walked away, Catherine pulled out her phone and opened her messages. The most recent text was from Ghost Command Phase 2 complete. Authorization granted for Phase 3. Full investigation proceeding. Well done, Commander. But beneath that message was one that Catherine had kept for 3 years, never able to delete it. It was the last text Maria had sent her the morning of the training dive that had killed her mom. "I'm nervous about today's exercise. The instructors are pushing really hard. But I'm not going to quit. I'm going to make you proud. Love you." Catherine's fingers trembled, genuinely, trembled this time as she typed a response that would never be read. "You already made me proud, baby girl. And now I'm going to make sure no one else's daughter has to be afraid." She sent the message into the void and closed her eyes against the tears that finally came. Around her, the machinery of military justice was beginning to turn, setting in motion reforms that would ripple through every SEAL training facility in the world. But in that moment, Catherine Morrison, legendary Ghost Trident operator, newly promoted captain architect of sweeping institutional reform, was just a mother grieving her daughter. And in the shadows of the officers' club, as MPs continued their arrests and witnesses gave their statements, no one noticed the slight woman in the royal blue blouse, quietly weeping for everything that had been lost and everything that might yet be saved. The silence after the MPs left felt heavier than the chaos that preceded it. Catherine stood alone in the center of the officers' club, aware that 50 pairs of eyes were still watching her from various corners of the room. The ones who hadn't been arrested, the ones who hadn't confessed, the ones who were trying to figure out if they were next. "Captain Morrison," a voice from behind her, male, gravelly with age and cigarettes. "A word if you don't mind." She turned to find Master Chief Daniel Porter standing 3 feet away. At 62, he was the oldest active SEAL at Coronado, a legend in his own right. His face was deeply lined, scarred from 3 decades of combat operations that he'd never discuss. His eyes were the flat gray of a winter ocean. "Master Chief Porter," Catherine acknowledged. "I was wondering when you'd make your presence known." "I've been here the whole time, watching." He gestured to a corner table far from the main action. "Saw the whole show. Impressive performance. You had Brennan dancing on strings like a puppet." "It wasn't a performance. Everything's a performance when you're trying to prove a point." Porter's expression didn't change. "Question is, what happens now? You've arrested half the command structure. You've terrified everyone else. You've exposed corruption that goes up to the colonel level. But you haven't actually changed anything yet. That's the hard part." Catherine felt the exhaustion settling into her bones. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving behind 3 years of accumulated grief and rage. "The hard part is burying your daughter, Master Chief. Everything after that is just details." Porter's eyes flickered with something that might have been sympathy. "Maria was one of the best candidates I've seen in 40 years. Smart tough, didn't quit even when she should have. She reminded me of someone." He paused. "She reminded me of you back when you were running operations that officially never happened. You know who I am. Known since you walked through that door 6 hours ago." Porter pulled out a chair and sat gesturing for Catherine to do the same. "Ghost Trident isn't as secret as you think. Not to the old-timers who've been around long enough to notice patterns. Women who appear in after-action reports as local assets but move and shoot like Tier 1 operators. Missions that succeed in impossible circumstances with impossible efficiency. The smart ones figure it out eventually." Catherine remained standing. "And yet you said nothing when Brennan was humiliating me." "Because I wanted to see how far he'd go. How many others would follow him? Who would stand up and who would stay silent?" Porter's voice hardened. "You weren't the only one gathering evidence tonight, Captain. I've been documenting safety violations and misconduct for 5 years. I've sent 17 reports to Colonel Drummond requesting investigations. All of them disappeared into his desk drawer. I was starting to think I'd have to go outside the chain of command, but then you showed up. Why didn't you speak up for Maria when she was drowning?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Porter's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Catherine saw genuine pain in his eyes. "Because I wasn't there," he said quietly. "I was supposed to be the senior safety observer that day. It was my rotation. But Drummond pulled me for a meeting about budget allocations, a meeting that lasted 4 hours and accomplished nothing. When I got back, your daughter was already dead. Brennan had run the exercise without proper safety oversight. Chen had frozen instead of calling for extraction. And by the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late." He pulled a flask from his jacket pocket and took a long drink. "I've asked myself every day for 3 years if Drummond delayed me on purpose. If he knew Brennan was planning to push the candidates harder than protocol allowed. If Maria's death was negligence or something worse." Catherine's hands clenched into fists. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that defense contractors pay very well for facilities that don't ask too many questions about equipment failures. I'm suggesting that dead female candidates make excellent arguments against integrated training programs. I'm suggesting that some people in this organization would rather see women fail than admit they might be wrong about their capabilities. You're talking about conspiracy to commit murder. I'm talking about profit margins and institutional prejudice creating conditions where murder becomes statistically inevitable." Porter met her eyes steadily. "The question is, how deep are you willing to dig?" Before Catherine could respond, Captain Voss returned her expression grim. "We have a problem. Colonel Drummond isn't responding to summons. His office is empty, his personal vehicle is gone, and his phone is turned off." Catherine's exhaustion vanished, replaced by cold, tactical focus. "He's running. That's my assessment. I've already contacted base security and highway patrol, but he's got at least a 30-minute head start." "He won't run far," Porter said. "Men like Drummond don't have the imagination for it. He'll go somewhere he feels safe. Somewhere he thinks his connections will protect him. Catherine was already pulling out her phone. Elena, who else in the command structure might help him? Who else has been taking contractor money? Voss scrolled through her tablet. According to the financial records we've subpoenaed, Drummond has been making regular payments to 3 other officers. Major Sarah Hendricks, supply officer, Commander Thomas Wade, training operations, and Captain Robert Chen, intelligence. Chen. Catherine's head snapped up. Related to Lieutenant Chen. Her father. He's the one who recommended her for this posting. Porter whistled low. Family business. That's ugly. Catherine's mind raced through the implications. Lieutenant Chen confessed tonight. If her father finds out she's turned state's evidence before we can secure him, he'll destroy whatever evidence he has access to. Elena, we need to lock down the intelligence office right now. Already on it. I've got MPs en route. Voss paused, listening to something on her earpiece. They're reporting the office is empty. Captain Chen left the building 20 minutes ago. He knows. Catherine turned to Porter. Master Chief, you said Drummond would go somewhere he feels safe. Where? Porter thought for a moment. There's a private club in La Jolla, high-end exclusive membership. Defense contractors use it for networking. Drummond goes there every Friday night. He probably thinks civilian jurisdiction will complicate things long enough for him to lawyer up. How long to get there? 45 minutes in traffic, maybe 30 if you drive like you're on a mission. Catherine was already moving toward the door. Elena, I need a vehicle and authorization to operate outside base jurisdiction. Catherine, wait. Voss caught her arm. You're exhausted. You've been running on adrenaline and anger for hours. Let the MPs handle this. The MPs don't have authority in La Jolla. By the time jurisdictional issues are sorted out, Drummond will have called every political favor he's accumulated in 30 years. We need to move now. Porter stood. I'm coming with you. You'll need someone who knows the club's layout. This isn't your fight, Master Chief. The hell it isn't. Maria trained under my program. When she died, that became my failure as much as anyone's. Porter's voice was rough with emotion. I let your daughter down, Captain. I won't make that mistake twice. Catherine studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Elena, get us a vehicle, and inform local police that we're pursuing a suspect in a federal investigation. I don't want any surprises. 10 minutes later, Catherine and Porter were speeding north on Interstate 5 in an unmarked SUV. Catherine drove with the kind of controlled aggression that spoke of high-speed pursuit training weaving through Friday night traffic, while Porter coordinated with Voss over the phone. MPs have secured the intelligence office, Porter reported. They're saying Captain Chen deleted approximately 60% of the files before he left, but the backups are intact. We'll recover everything eventually. Eventually isn't good enough. If Drummond gets to a lawyer before we get to him, those files become inadmissible. Catherine accelerated around a slow-moving semi-truck. Did Chen take anything physical? Hard drives, documents. Negative. Security cameras show him leaving with just his briefcase and phone. Catherine's jaw tightened. Then he's meeting someone, probably to hand off evidence or coordinate their defense strategy. Elena, have we identified Drummond's vehicle yet? Voss's voice crackled through the phone's speaker. Silver Mercedes S-Class California plates. Highway patrol spotted it 10 minutes ago heading toward La Jolla. They're following at a distance. Tell them not to stop him yet. I want to see who he meets. Porter glanced at her. You think there are more people involved? I think defense contractors don't pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to just 3 officers. I think this goes wider and deeper than we've uncovered so far, and I think Drummond is about to lead us to the rest of them. They drove in silence for several minutes. The lights of San Diego blurred past, and Catherine found her mind drifting back to Maria. Her daughter had called her the night before she died, excited and nervous about the next day's training evolution. Catherine had been in the middle of a classified briefing, unable to talk for more than a few minutes. You've got this baby, Catherine had said, trying to pack reassurance into 30 seconds of conversation. You're stronger than you know. Call me after, okay? But there had been no call after. Just a knock on her door at 3 in the morning, 2 officers with expressions that told her everything before they said a word. Captain, Porter's voice cut through her thoughts. You're doing 80 in a 60 zone. Might want to ease up before we get pulled over. Catherine forced her foot to lift slightly off the accelerator. Sorry, lost focus for a moment. It's the daughter thing. Makes you crazy, makes you reckless. I've got 3 daughters myself. Can't imagine. And Porter trailed off, then changed subject abruptly. You really operated in Tehran back in 2003. That's classified. Yeah, well, so is most of my career, but we're both too old to care about that now. Porter shifted in his seat. I was part of the logistics support for that operation. Never knew who the operator was who went in. Command just said to secure the perimeter and trust the process. 6 hours later, 3 high-value targets were eliminated, 2 CIA assets were extracted, and no one even knew we'd been there. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that what you did mattered. The Ghost Trident program, whatever else people say about it, saved American lives. Your career meant something, and Maria's death doesn't erase that. Catherine's throat tightened. It doesn't justify it either. No, nothing justifies it. But maybe stopping the people who caused it gives her death meaning. Maybe that's the best any of us can do for the people we've lost. They took the exit for La Jolla, entering the wealthy coastal neighborhood with its pristine streets and multi-million-dollar homes. The club Porter had mentioned was situated on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a sprawling Spanish-style building that radiated old money and exclusive access. Security's going to be tight, Porter warned as they approached. Members-only private property. We can't just walk in without probable cause. We have probable cause. We're pursuing a suspect in an active investigation. In civilian jurisdiction, without a warrant, without local police support. Porter looked at her seriously. If you do this wrong, everything we've gathered tonight becomes fruit of the poisonous tree. Every arrest, every confession, every piece of evidence, all inadmissible. Catherine pulled into a parking spot with a view of the club's main entrance. Drummond's Mercedes was parked near the front door. Then I guess I'd better do it right. She pulled out her phone and called Voss. Elena, I need you to contact La Jolla PD and request immediate backup for apprehension of a federal fugitive. Tell them we have reason to believe the suspect is armed and may resist arrest. That should give us legal authority to enter the premises. Already on it. They're dispatching 2 units, ETA 7 minutes. We don't have 7 minutes. Drummond could destroy evidence or flee through a back exit. Catherine watched as a second vehicle pulled up to the club entrance, a black BMW that she recognized from the base motor pool. Captain Chen emerged carrying a leather briefcase. And we've got company. Captain Chen just arrived. Catherine, wait for backup. If you go in there alone. I'm not alone. I've got Master Chief Porter, and I've got authorization under the National Defense Authorization Act to pursue suspects involved in crimes affecting national security. That's good enough. She ended the call before Voss could argue further. Porter was watching her with an expression that mixed admiration and concern. You're going to burn a lot of bridges tonight, Captain. I've been burning bridges since my daughter died, Master Chief. At this point, I'm just making sure the right people burn with me. They exited the vehicle and approached the club entrance. A valet in a crisp white jacket moved to intercept them. I'm sorry, but this is a private club, members and their guests only. Catherine pulled out her military ID. Captain Catherine Morrison, U.S. Navy. I need to speak with Colonel Richard Drummond immediately. It's a matter of national security. The valet's professional smile didn't waver. I'm not at liberty to confirm or deny the presence of any club members. If you'd like to contact club management during business hours. Son, let me make this very simple. Porter stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades of command presence. In approximately 6 minutes, this place is going to be swarming with police officers and military police. You can either let us in now and maintain some semblance of dignity, or you can obstruct a federal investigation and spend the night answering questions about your role in harboring fugitives. Your choice. The valet's smile finally cracked. I need to speak with my supervisor. You do that. We'll be inside. Catherine walked past him before he could protest further. The club's interior was exactly what she expected: dark wood paneling, leather chairs, oil paintings of stern-faced men who'd probably made their fortunes exploiting someone else's labor. A few heads turned as she and Porter entered their casual military bearing, standing out against the studied elegance of the other patrons. Porter nodded toward a private dining room near the back. Through the partially open door, Catherine could see Drummond and Captain Chen seated at a table with two men in expensive suits. One was overweight, balding, sweating despite the air conditioning. The other was lean, silver-haired, with the kind of calculated charm that came from years of convincing people to sign contracts they'd later regret. "Defense contractors," Porter murmured. "The fat one is Gerald Hutchins, CEO of Tactical Solutions International. They supply most of the training equipment at Coronado. The other one is Marcus Reeves, VP of Government Relations for Sentinel Defense Group. They provide consulting services. Consulting services that include paying off military officers to ignore safety violations, among other things." Catherine approached the dining room door. Through the gap, she could hear fragments of conversation. "Need to contain this before it spreads. My contacts at the Pentagon are already asking questions." "Your contacts can't help you now, Gerald. This has gone beyond internal investigation. They're talking about congressional hearings." "Then we make sure certain documents disappear. Chen, you said you deleted the files." Catherine pushed the door open. "I'm afraid the backups are already in federal custody, gentlemen. But please don't let me interrupt." 4 pairs of eyes snapped toward her. Drummond's face went pale, then flushed red. "You have no authority here. This is private property. I'll have you arrested for what? Pursuing a fugitive who fled military jurisdiction to avoid arrest on charges of negligent homicide and conspiracy. Please, Colonel, do go on. I'm sure the federal prosecutors will find it fascinating." Captain Chen was on his feet, his hand moving toward his waistband. Porter moved faster, his own weapon drawn and aimed with steady precision. "I wouldn't, Captain. Assaulting a superior officer carries serious penalties, and I really don't want to shoot you in front of these nice people." Chen froze his hand, still hovering near his concealed weapon. His face was twisted with rage and fear. "You've ruined my daughter, my career, my life, all because you couldn't accept that your precious Maria just wasn't good enough." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow, but she kept her voice steady. "Your daughter had the courage to tell the truth. That's more than I can say for you. And as for Maria not being good enough, she was twice the operator you've ever been. She just had the misfortune of training under instructors who valued cruelty over competence. My daughter is going to prison because of you. Your daughter is going to prison because she participated in a negligent homicide and then stayed silent for 3 years. But at least she'll be able to live with herself eventually. Can you say the same?" The silver-haired contractor, Reeves, set down his wine glass with practiced calm. "Captain Morrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're simply having a business dinner. Whatever accusations you're leveling at Colonel Drummond have nothing to do with us." "Really? So the $200,000 your company paid him over the past 3 years was for what exactly?" His sparkling personality. Reeves's expression didn't change. "Consulting fees. Perfectly legal. Colonel Drummond has extensive expertise in training operations, and we value his insights. Insights like how to certify defective equipment as operational, like how to falsify safety inspection reports, like how to cover up training deaths that might damage your company's reputation and cost you lucrative government contracts. Those are serious accusations. I assume you have proof." Catherine smiled without warmth. "I have 17 years of documented safety violations. I have financial records showing systematic bribes to multiple officers. I have testimony from 11 witnesses describing a culture of negligence and corruption. And I have surveillance footage from tonight showing Colonel Drummond fleeing custody and meeting with you to coordinate obstruction of justice. So yes, Mr. Reeves, I have proof." Sirens wailed outside, growing louder. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. The cavalry had arrived. Drummond lunged from his chair, making a desperate move toward the dining room's back exit. Porter intercepted him, years of hand-to-hand combat training making the takedown look effortless despite his age. Drummond hit the floor hard, the air whooshing out of his lungs. "Stay down, Colonel," Porter said, his knee pressed firmly between Drummond's shoulder blades. "You've embarrassed yourself enough for one night." La Jolla police officers flooded into the room, followed closely by military police. Voss arrived moments later, her expression tight with controlled fury. "You couldn't wait 7 minutes. They were about to flee. I made a tactical decision. You made a reckless decision that could have gotten you killed. Voss turned to the police officers. Take them all into custody. Federal charges pending. And someone read them their rights before they start claiming we violated procedure. As the contractors and officers were handcuffed and led away, Catherine finally allowed herself to lean against the wall. The adrenaline was fading again, leaving her shaky and nauseated. 3 years of investigation, 3 years of planning, 3 years of grief and rage, and it had all come down to one night of controlled chaos. Porter approached, holstering his weapon. Hell of a night, Captain. It's not over yet. No, but the worst part is, everything else is just paperwork and testimony. He paused. Your daughter would be proud of what you did tonight. You know that, right? Catherine closed her eyes against the sudden sting of tears. My daughter would be alive if I'd done this 3 years ago. If I'd pushed harder, investigated faster, refused to accept the official story. Your daughter would be alive if the people responsible for her safety had done their jobs. This isn't on you. Isn't it? I spent 30 years operating in the shadows, trusting that the institution I served had integrity. I never questioned whether that trust was misplaced. I never imagined that the same system that sent me into Tehran and Karachi and Yemen would sacrifice my daughter to protect its reputation and maintain corrupt contracts. Her voice broke. I failed her, Master Chief. I failed to see the danger that was right in front of me. Then honor her by making sure no other mother has to make that discovery. Porter's voice was gentle but firm. Grief is natural. Guilt is destructive. Know the difference. Catherine nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. Around them, police officers were securing the scene, taking statements, collecting evidence. It was overwhelming and surreal, the culmination of everything she'd worked toward, and yet it felt hollow. Victory without vindication. Justice without joy. Voss returned from coordinating with the police. They're taking Drummond and Chen to federal detention. The contractors are being held in local custody pending arraignment. The prosecutors are already putting together the case. This is going to be big, Catherine. Really big. Congressional hearings, media coverage, probably a full investigation into defense contractor practices across all branches. Good. It should be big. 7 women died because people prioritized profit over safety. That deserves attention. It also means you're going to be in the spotlight. Ghost Protocol can't protect your identity anymore. By tomorrow morning, every news outlet in the country is going to know who you are and what you've done. Catherine had known this moment was coming, had prepared for it as much as anyone could prepare for their entire life being exposed to public scrutiny. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different things. My daughter is dead, she said quietly. Compared to that, what does public exposure matter? It matters because you'll lose the ability to operate in the shadows. You'll lose the thing that's defined your entire career. I lost that the moment Maria died. Everything since then has just been cleanup. Catherine straightened, forcing steel back into her spine. What's the status on the Morrison Protocol implementation? Are we cleared to begin reforms? Pentagon approved it an hour ago. You have full authority to redesign training protocols at Coronado. Budget, personnel, equipment, it's all yours. Then that's what I focus on now, making sure this never happens again. Porter's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed the screen to Catherine. It was a message from the base forwarded through official channels. All female SEAL candidates requesting transfer from other facilities to train under Morrison Protocol. Current count 47. More expected. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but maybe the distant possibility of it. 47 women who trusted that the reforms she was implementing would keep them safe. 47 women who wouldn't be Maria, who wouldn't drown, while instructors ignored their distress signals. 47, she said softly. Maria would have been 48. Then we make sure all 47 graduate, Porter replied. We make sure they're trained harder and better than any SEAL candidates in history. We prove that safety and standards aren't contradictory. We show the world that your daughter didn't die in vain. Catherine met his eyes and saw the same determination that had sustained her through 3 years of investigation. You're volunteering to be part of the training cadre. Damn right I am. I've got 2 years left before mandatory retirement. I'm going to spend them making sure the Morrison Protocol succeeds. Consider it my penance for not being there when Maria needed me. You don't owe me penance, Master Chief. Maybe not, but I owe it to every female candidate who's going to walk through those gates expecting to be treated with the same respect and rigor as their male counterparts. I owe it to the institution I've served for 40 years to prove we can be better than we've been. They walked out of the club together, leaving behind the chaos of the arrest scene. Outside, the Pacific Ocean stretched dark and infinite under a moonless sky. Catherine stood on the bluff, breathing in salt air, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about the arrests. Didn't know who you were until tonight. Just wanted to say thank you. My daughter starts SEAL training next year and she's not afraid anymore. That's because of you. A grateful father. Then another. My sister died during training 4 years ago. They told us it was an accident. Now I know the truth. Thank you for caring enough to fight. Marcus Rodriguez. And another, I quit SEAL training after 2 weeks because of harassment. I couldn't report. Watching you tonight made me believe maybe I could try again. Former candidate Jay Williams. The messages kept coming, dozens of them from people whose lives had been touched by the corruption she'd exposed. People who'd lost daughters, sisters, friends. People who'd given up on justice. People who were ready to believe again. Catherine read each one, tears streaming down her face, the grief and rage that had sustained her for 3 years finally beginning to transform into something else. Not healing, she would never heal from losing Maria. But purpose, direction, a reason to keep fighting that extended beyond vengeance. Captain Voss had approached quietly. We need to get you back to base. There's going to be a media circus when this breaks, and we need to coordinate messaging with public affairs. Let me have a moment, please. Voss nodded and stepped back, giving her space. Catherine pulled out her phone and opened her photos, scrolling to the last picture she had of Maria. Her daughter was smiling, confident, beautiful in her training gear. The photo had been taken the morning before she died. I got them, baby, Catherine whispered to the image. I got every single one of them, and I'm going to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. The wind off the ocean picked up cold and sharp, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. Catherine pocketed her phone and turned back toward the SUV where Porter and Voss were waiting. Let's go, she said. We have 47 candidates counting on us, and approximately 48 hours before this becomes the biggest military scandal of the decade. I want to have the Morrison Protocol implementation plan finalized before then. As they drove back toward Coronado, Catherine allowed herself one final glance at the ocean, dark and mysterious and full of hidden depths. Like her career, like her grief, like the future she was building on the foundation of her daughter's sacrifice. The hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in 3 years, Catherine Morrison felt ready to face it. The base was ablaze with activity when they returned at 2 in the morning. Word had spread fast, faster than Catherine had anticipated. Clusters of personnel stood outside barracks talking in hushed voices, checking their phones, trying to piece together what had happened. When Catherine's SUV passed through the main gate, heads turned. Some nodded in respect. Others looked away. You're already dividing the base, Voss observed from the passenger seat. People are choosing sides. Good. I'd rather know where everyone stands now than discover it later when lives are on the line. Catherine parked outside the command building. How long until the morning briefing? 4 hours. But you need sleep, Catherine. You've been running on fumes and fury for... Sleep can wait. I need to review the personnel files for every training instructor currently assigned to Coronado. I need to identify who stays, who goes, and who needs additional oversight. I need to draft the Morrison Protocol implementation timeline. And I need to do it before the sun comes up and the media descends. Porter climbed out of the back seat, his joints cracking audibly. Captain, even the toughest operators need rest. Push yourself too hard and you'll make mistakes. Mistakes that could undermine everything we accomplished tonight. He's right, Voss added. Get 3 hours of sleep. I'll have the personnel files ready when you wake up. The Pentagon isn't expecting your preliminary report until noon. You have time. Catherine wanted to argue, but her body was betraying her. Her hands trembled with exhaustion, and the edges of her vision had gone soft and blurry. 3 hours, not a minute more. Deal. Come on, I'll walk you to temporary quarters. As they crossed the base, Catherine noticed Ensign Torres standing outside the female barracks, still in her uniform despite the late hour. The young woman straightened when she saw Catherine approaching. "Ma'am, I know it's late, but I wanted to thank you for what you did tonight, for what you're going to do." "Thank me after you graduate, Ensign. That's when we'll know if the reforms actually work." Torres hesitated, then spoke quickly, as if she might lose her nerve. "My sister tried to become a SEAL 3 years ago. She quit after 6 weeks. She never told me why, just said it wasn't for her. But tonight she called me. She told me what really happened. The harassment, the instructors who made it clear women weren't welcome, the training accidents that weren't really accidents. She said she reported it and nothing changed, so she quit." Catherine felt the familiar rage building in her chest. "What's your sister's name?" "Gabriela Torres. She's a marine biologist now. Lives in San Diego." She said. Torres's voice cracked. "She said maybe she'll try again, under the new protocols, if you'll have her. Tell your sister to submit her application. I'll review it personally." Catherine paused. "And Ensign, when you start training next month, I want you to remember something. The Morrison Protocol isn't about making things easier. It's about making things fair. You're still going to be pushed to your absolute limits. You're still going to want to quit. The difference is when you succeed, it will be because you earned it. And when you fail, it will be because the standards were too high, not because the system was rigged against you." "I understand, ma'am, and I won't fail. See that you don't. We've got a lot riding on your generation." Catherine continued to the temporary quarters, a small room with a cot, a desk, and nothing else. Spartan accommodations that suited her just fine. She collapsed onto the cot without bothering to remove her boots, and sleep took her instantly. 3 hours later, she woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently. The screen showed 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. She ignored them all and headed for the shower, letting scalding water wash away the physical exhaustion, even as the emotional weight remained. By the time she reached the command center at 6 in the morning, Voss had assembled a full situation board. Personnel files, financial records, equipment, inspection reports, and witness statements covered every available surface. Master Chief Porter was already there, along with Senior Chief Webb and 3 other senior NCOs Catherine didn't recognize. "Morning briefing," Voss announced without preamble. "Drummond and Captain Chen are in federal detention. The contractors are being arraigned this morning. Lieutenant Chen and 6 others have entered plea agreements in exchange for testimony. Brennan is still claiming innocence, but the evidence is overwhelming. He'll crack eventually." "What about the media?" Catherine asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Webb. "It broke 3 hours ago. Every major outlet is running the story. Legendary Ghost operator exposes SEAL training corruption. Mother's 3-year quest for justice. Defense contractors bribed officers to hide training deaths. You're the lead story on every news channel." Catherine felt her stomach twist. "Have they released my photo?" "Not yet. Pentagon Public Affairs is trying to control the narrative, but it's only a matter of time. You need to prepare for media requests. Probably congressional testimony, too. I'll testify if it helps the reform stick, but I'm not doing press conferences or interviews. My focus is on implementing the Morrison Protocol, not becoming a celebrity." One of the unfamiliar NCOs stepped forward, a woman in her early 40s with Sergeant Major insignia and eyes that had seen too much. "Captain Morrison, I'm Sergeant Major Patricia Reeves. I've been assigned as your senior enlisted advisor for the Reform Task Force. Before we proceed, I need to ask you something directly." "Go ahead." "Are you doing this for your daughter, or are you doing this for the institution? Because if it's just about revenge, if this is just about making yourself feel better about what you couldn't prevent, then we're going to have problems. Personal vendettas don't build sustainable reform." The challenge was direct, almost confrontational. Catherine respected it immediately. "I'm doing this because 7 women are dead, and the system that killed them is still operating. I'm doing this because 47 female candidates are about to put their lives in our hands, and I refuse to let them down the way I let my daughter down. Is that personal? Absolutely. Does it compromise my judgment? You tell me, Sergeant Major. You've reviewed my plan. Is it sound? Reeves held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. It's the most comprehensive reform proposal I've seen in 20 years of service. If we can implement even half of it, we'll revolutionize SEAL training. But it's going to require resources, personnel, and political capital. Are you prepared to fight for all of that? I've been fighting for 3 years. I'm just getting started. Then let's get to work. Reeves turned to the situation board. I've identified 17 training instructors who need to be removed immediately. Not because they're corrupt like Brennan, but because they're products of a toxic culture that prioritizes dominance over competence. They can't be reformed. They have to go. Porter crossed his arms. 17 instructors. That's nearly 30% of our training cadre. We can't maintain current training schedules with that kind of personnel loss. Then we adjust the schedules, Catherine said. We delay the next training cycle by 6 weeks while we recruit and vet new instructors. We bring in people who understand that safety and standards aren't contradictory. We rebuild from the foundation up. The Pentagon won't like that. They've got quotas to meet congressional mandates. The Pentagon will accept it because the alternative is another scandal in 6 months when we rush implementation and someone else dies. I'm not compromising on this, Master Chief. Not after what happened to Maria. Webb spoke up, his weathered face troubled. Captain, I understand your position, but we need to be realistic. The Pentagon bureaucracy moves slowly. Getting approval for this kind of sweeping change could take months, maybe years. Then we bypass the bureaucracy. Catherine pulled out her phone and showed them a text message she'd received an hour ago. This is from Admiral Patricia Chen, no relation to Captain Chen, the current commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. She's given me direct authority to implement reforms at Coronado as a pilot program. If it succeeds, it rolls out to every SEAL training facility in the country. If it fails, I take the fall and everything goes back to the way it was. That's a hell of a lot of pressure, Reeves observed. Good. Pressure creates diamonds or crushes coal. We're about to find out which one we are. For the next 4 hours, they worked through the implementation plan. Every training protocol was examined. Every piece of equipment was evaluated. Every instructor was assessed. Catherine refused to accept half measures or compromises. If something didn't meet the new safety standards, it was cut. If an instructor had a history of misconduct, they were removed. If a procedure put candidates at unnecessary risk, it was redesigned. By 10 in the morning, they had a preliminary framework. By noon, they had a detailed timeline. By 2 in the afternoon, Catherine was presenting the plan to Admiral Chen via secure video conference. Admiral Chen was 62, gray-haired, and had a reputation for being harder than coffin nails. She listened to Catherine's presentation without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Catherine finished, there was a long silence. This is the most aggressive reform proposal I've ever seen, Chen finally said. It's going to cost millions of dollars. It's going to require reassigning personnel from other programs. It's going to piss off contractors, politicians, and half of the SEAL community. And if it fails, it's going to set back integrated training by a decade. Yes, ma'am, all of that is true. And you're willing to stake your career on it. My career doesn't matter, Admiral. What matters is that we stop sacrificing competent candidates to protect an incompetent system. Chen's expression softened slightly. I read the report about your daughter. I'm sorry for your loss, Captain, but I need to know, can you lead this reform objectively, or is your judgment compromised by grief? It was the same question Reeves had asked, the question Catherine had been asking herself for 3 years. My judgment isn't compromised, Admiral. It's clarified. I spent 30 years serving an institution I believed had integrity. When my daughter died, I learned that belief was naive. Now I'm going to make sure the institution actually lives up to the values it claims to represent. That's not compromised judgment. That's moral clarity. Chen studied her through the screen for another long moment. Approved. You have 6 months to implement the Morrison Protocol at Coronado. If female candidates graduate at the same rate as male candidates with the same standards and with 0 training deaths or serious injuries, we'll expand it nationwide. If not, you're relieved of command and we return to previous protocols. Clear. Crystal clear, ma'am. One more thing, Captain. The media is going to try to make this about you. They're going to want to tell the story of the grieving mother who took down corrupt officers. Don't let them. This isn't about individuals. It's about institutional reform. Keep the focus on the system, not the personalities. Understood. Good luck, Catherine. You're going to need it. The call ended. Catherine sat back in her chair, feeling the full weight of what she'd just agreed to. 6 months to prove that everything she'd fought for wasn't just revenge, dressed up as reform. 6 months to honor Maria's memory by saving the women who came after her. We're really doing this, Voss said quietly. We're really doing this. Catherine stood and addressed the assembled team. First priority is personnel. Sergeant Major Reeves. I want those 17 instructors off the training line by end of business today. Master Chief Porter, start recruiting replacements. I want people who understand that mentorship isn't the same as domination. Senior Chief Webb, audit every piece of training equipment. If it doesn't meet manufacturer specifications, it gets replaced. I don't care what it costs. Yes, ma'am, they responded in unison. And someone get Ensign Torres in here. She's going to be my liaison to the incoming female candidates. I want to know what they're thinking, what they're afraid of, what they need to succeed. We're building this program with their input, not just for their benefit. Over the next 3 weeks, Coronado transformed. The 17 instructors were reassigned to desk jobs or early retirement. New instructors arrived, many of them women who'd served in special operations roles in other branches, along with male instructors who'd been carefully vetted for their commitment to fair training practices. Equipment was replaced or repaired. Safety protocols were rewritten. The entire culture began to shift. But not everyone was happy about it. Catherine encountered resistance everywhere, from contractors angry about lost revenue from old guard SEALs who saw the reforms as weakness from politicians who'd received campaign contributions from the implicated defense companies. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks into implementation. Catherine arrived at her office to find graffiti spray-painted across her door. Maria died because she was weak. You're destroying the teams to hide your failure as a mother. She stood there staring at the words, feeling rage and grief war inside her chest. Voss arrived moments later, already on her phone, calling base security. Don't, Catherine said quietly. Leave it. Catherine, this is a direct threat. We need to investigate. I said, leave it. I want everyone who walks past this office to see what we're up against. I want them to understand that this isn't about politics or policy. It's about people who are so threatened by change that they'll attack a dead woman to maintain their power. This isn't healthy. You're torturing yourself. I'm reminding myself why this matters. Catherine turned away from the door. Now let's get to work. We have 47 candidates arriving in 2 weeks, and I want everything perfect when they get here. The graffiti stayed on the door for 3 days before someone Catherine never found out who painted over it in the middle of the night. In its place was a simple message: Maria's legacy making us better than we were. Catherine cried when she saw it standing alone in the hallway at 5 in the morning, finally allowing herself to feel something other than rage and determination. Someone understood. Someone cared. Maybe this was going to work after all. The 47 candidates arrived on a Monday morning in early October. Catherine stood on the training grounds as they filed off the buses, noting their expressions, nervous, determined, trying to project confidence they didn't entirely feel. Torres was among them, along with her sister Gabriella, who'd reapplied and been accepted immediately. Catherine addressed them without preamble. You're here because you want to be SEALs, not because you want to prove something about gender equality, not because you want to make a political statement, but because you believe you have what it takes to serve at the highest level of military capability. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am, they shouted in unison. Good. Because the Morrison Protocol isn't about lowering standards. It's about ensuring that the only thing between you and graduation is your own capability. You're going to train harder than you've ever trained in your lives. You're going to be pushed to physical and mental limits you didn't know you had. You're going to want to quit. Some of you will quit, but those who make it through will have earned the Trident just as much as any man who's ever worn it. Are you ready? Yes, ma'am. Then let's begin. The first week was brutal. Catherine observed every training evolution, personally watching for signs of the old culture creeping back in. She saw instructors who were tough but fair, who pushed candidates hard without crossing into cruelty. She saw candidates struggling, supporting each other, refusing to quit even when every muscle screamed for rest. And she saw Torres, both of them, excelling. Maya was strong in water operations. Gabriella was exceptional in land navigation. Together, they demonstrated the kind of teamwork that the SEAL ethos was supposed to embody. But on the 8th day, disaster struck. During a night navigation exercise, one of the candidates, a 26-year-old from Montana named Sarah Chen, collapsed. Medical personnel rushed her to the base hospital where doctors diagnosed severe dehydration and heat exhaustion. Catherine was in the hospital waiting room within 10 minutes, her worst fears clawing at her chest. Not again. Please God, not again. The doctor emerged after an hour. She's stable. We caught it early. Got fluids in her, brought her core temperature down. She'll make a full recovery. Catherine's legs nearly gave out with relief. Can I see her? Brief visits only. She needs rest. Sarah was awake when Catherine entered the room, her face pale but alert. When she saw Catherine, she struggled to sit up. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I should have hydrated better. I should have... Stop. Catherine sat in the chair beside the bed. You have nothing to apologize for. The instructors noticed you were struggling and pulled you immediately. The medical team responded within 90 seconds. The protocols worked exactly as designed. That's what the Morrison Protocol is for catching problems before they become tragedies. But I failed. I couldn't complete the exercise. You didn't fail. You encountered a medical issue and received appropriate treatment. When you're cleared to return to training, you'll pick up where you left off. That's not failure. That's part of the process. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. My parents don't think I should come back. They say it's too dangerous, that I almost died. Did the doctors say you almost died? Well, no, but then you didn't almost die. You got dehydrated, we caught it, we treated it, end of story. Catherine leaned forward. Listen to me, Sarah. Your parents are scared because they love you. That's natural. But you know what? My daughter actually did die during training, and I'm here telling you to go back. Do you know why? No, ma'am. Because the whole point of what I'm doing, the whole point of the Morrison Protocol, is to make sure that what happened to Maria never happens to anyone else. You got sick, and the system saved you. That's proof the reforms are working. So when you're cleared, you get back out there and you finish what you started. You understand? Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good. Now rest. I'll check on you tomorrow. Catherine left the hospital feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The system had worked. A candidate had gotten in trouble, and instead of ignoring it or covering it up, the instructors had responded appropriately. Maybe this was actually going to succeed. But that night, back in her temporary quarters, she received a call from Voss. We have a problem. Sarah Chen's parents are filing a complaint with their congressman. They're claiming the training is too dangerous, that we're putting women at unnecessary risk. The congressman is calling for a review of the Morrison Protocol. Catherine closed her eyes, feeling exhaustion settle into her bones. Of course they are, because everything has to be a fight. Everything has to be a battle. What do you want me to do? Set up a meeting with the parents. I'll talk to them personally. If they understand what we're actually doing here, maybe they'll back down. And if they don't, then we fight, again. Because that's what this job is, fighting the same battles over and over until people finally understand that women's lives matter as much as men's convenience. The meeting with Sarah's parents happened 2 days later. They were farmers from Montana, good people who'd raised a daughter strong enough to attempt SEAL training. They sat across from Catherine in a conference room, their faces tight with fear and anger. Our daughter almost died, Sarah's father said without preamble. We sent her to serve her country, not to be killed by negligence. Your daughter got dehydrated during a training exercise, Catherine replied calmly. The instructors noticed immediately and pulled her from the exercise. Medical personnel treated her within 2 minutes. She's already recovering and will return to training next week. That's not negligence. That's exactly how the system should work. She shouldn't have gotten dehydrated in the first place. Sarah's mother's voice rose. That means the training is too hard, that you're pushing them beyond safe limits. Ma'am, with respect, SEAL training is supposed to push candidates beyond what they think their limits are. That's the point. The difference between the old system and the Morrison protocol is that we're watching for danger signs and responding appropriately. Your daughter is alive and well because the reforms worked. Or she's alive despite the training, the father countered. We want her withdrawn from the program. We want her home where she's safe. Catherine felt her control slipping. She'd been patient, diplomatic, understanding. But these parents were about to destroy their daughter's dream out of fear, and she couldn't let that happen. Your daughter is 26 years old, Catherine said, her voice hard. She's an adult who made her own choice to pursue SEAL training. You don't get to withdraw her. She does, and she's already told me she wants to continue. We're her parents. And I was Maria Morrison's parent. I was her mother for 24 years. I raised her, loved her, worried about her every single day she was in training. And then she died because the people who were supposed to keep her safe valued their careers more than her life. Catherine's voice broke, but she pushed through. I would give anything, absolutely anything, to have what you have right now. A daughter who got in trouble and lived because the system worked. You think I don't understand your fear? You think I don't know what it's like to be terrified every time your daughter walks out the door? The difference is, my daughter never came home. Yours will, and she'll come home as a SEAL, having achieved something extraordinary, because I made sure the system that killed my daughter won't kill yours. The room fell silent. Sarah's mother was crying. Her father stared at the table, his jaw working. Finally, he spoke. We just want her safe. So do I. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I've spent 3 years fighting to reform a system that was broken. Your daughter is safer today than Maria was 3 years ago, and every day we're making it safer still. But I can't promise she'll never get hurt. This is SEAL training. It's supposed to be hard. All I can promise is that if something goes wrong, we'll respond immediately and appropriately. We'll value her life more than our pride, and we'll make sure she has every chance to succeed. Sarah's father looked at Catherine for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll drop the complaint. But if anything happens to her, anything, I'm holding you personally responsible. I already hold myself personally responsible for every woman in this program. One more won't change that burden. They left, and Catherine remained in the conference room, trembling with exhaustion and emotion. Voss entered quietly and sat beside her. You okay? No, but I will be. I have to be, because if I fall apart now, everything falls apart with me. Catherine, you need to talk to someone, a therapist, a chaplain, someone who can help you process. I'll process after the first class graduates. Until then, I need to stay focused. That's still 5 months away. You can't keep running on empty for 5 more months. Watch me. But Voss was right, and Catherine knew it. The cracks were showing the weight of grief and responsibility, becoming harder to bear with each passing day. She needed help, but she couldn't afford to ask for it. Not when so many people were depending on her strength. That night alone in her quarters, Catherine finally allowed herself to break down completely. She sobbed into her pillow, mourning not just Maria, but the person she'd been before her daughter died. The operator who'd believed the system had integrity. The mother who'd trusted that her daughter would be safe. The woman who'd thought justice and reform could somehow fill the void left by loss. They couldn't. Nothing could. But maybe, just maybe, they could give Maria's death meaning. And maybe that would have to be enough. The breakdown lasted exactly 20 minutes. Catherine allowed herself that much, 20 minutes of raw grief, of screaming into her pillow, of letting the 3 years of accumulated pain pour out in ugly, gasping sobs. Then she washed her face, straightened her uniform, and went back to work. Because that's what operators did. They compartmentalized. They pushed through. They saved the falling apart for later, and later never came. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Catherine was reviewing equipment inspection reports when Voss knocked on her doorframe. You have guests. They're insisting on seeing you personally. Tell them to make an appointment through official channels. I don't have time for... It's Lieutenant Chen and her father. Catherine's head snapped up. Captain Chen is still in federal detention. Not anymore. He made bail 2 hours ago. And apparently the first thing he wanted to do was come here with his daughter. Every tactical instinct Catherine possessed screamed danger. Captain Chen had every reason to hate her, to want revenge, to sabotage the reforms that had destroyed his career. Having him on base was a security risk and a public relations nightmare. Have MPs standing by. If this goes sideways, I want them contained immediately. Already done. They're in conference room 3. Armed escort is outside the door. Catherine walked to the conference room, her hand instinctively checking the sidearm she now carried everywhere. Through the window, she could see Lieutenant Chen sitting rigidly upright, her face pale and drawn. Captain Chen sat beside her, looking 20 years older than his 56 years. Catherine entered, leaving the door open so the MPs could hear everything. You have 5 minutes to explain why you're on my base after being released on bail for federal crimes. Captain Chen stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. I'm here to apologize. To you, to my daughter, to every woman I failed during my time in command. Your apology means nothing. 7 women are dead because of decisions you made. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life in prison paying for those decisions. But before that happens, I wanted to tell you something. Something that might help your investigation. Catherine remained standing, arms crossed. I'm listening. There are more people involved than you've identified. The corruption goes higher than Drummond, deeper than a few bribed officers. There's a network, defense contractors, Pentagon officials, even some congressional staffers. They've been systematically undermining integrated training programs across all special operations branches, not just SEALs. Why would they do that? Money, reputation, ideology. Take your pick. Captain Chen's voice was bitter. Some genuinely believe women don't belong in combat roles. Others just see an opportunity to profit from the chaos. When integration programs fail, contractors get called in to fix the problems. They charge millions for consulting fees, new equipment, revised training protocols. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. Lieutenant Chen spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse. I didn't know the full extent until after I confessed. My father came to me in detention and told me everything. He said he couldn't live with himself if he stayed silent. Why should I believe either of you? This could be a desperate attempt to reduce your sentences by providing information. It is a desperate attempt, Captain Chen agreed. But that doesn't make it false. I have names, dates, financial records. I've been keeping insurance files for 5 years, evidence I plan to use if the network ever turned on me. I'm giving it all to you now. No deals, no conditions. Whether it helps my case or not, you need to know how deep this goes. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. Everything's on here. Encrypted, but the password is Maria's birth date. I figured if anyone deserved access to this information, it's her mother. Catherine stared at the drive, her mind racing. This could be genuine intelligence or an elaborate trap. The encryption password reference to Maria was either a gesture of respect or a calculated manipulation. Why use my daughter's birth date? Because every time I enter that password, I have to think about her, about what I did, about how my cowardice contributed to her death. Captain Chen's voice cracked. You asked me once if I could live with myself. The answer is no, but maybe I can die with myself a little easier if I help stop the people who are still doing what I did. Catherine picked up the drive carefully. I'll have our cyber team analyze this. If it's genuine intelligence, it might reduce your sentence. If it's some kind of malware or disinformation, I'll make sure the prosecutors know you attempted to obstruct justice, even after your arrest. Fair enough. One more thing. Why bring your daughter with you? She's already cooperating. She didn't need to be here for this. Lieutenant Chen met Catherine's eyes directly. I wanted to face you together, to show you that I'm not hiding behind my father's confession, that I'm taking full responsibility for my role in what happened, and to tell you that I've been working with the prosecutors to identify other officers who participated in cover-ups. How many others? 12 so far. across 3 different training facilities, all of them involved in suppressing reports of misconduct, falsifying safety records, or accepting payments from contractors. Catherine felt dizzy. 12 more officers, 3 more facilities. This wasn't just about Coronado. This was endemic to the entire special operations community. Jesus Christ, this is bigger than I thought. Much bigger, Captain Chen confirmed. And the people at the top are scared. You've cost them millions of dollars and exposed their methods. They're going to fight back, hard. You need to be prepared for that. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. There's a difference. He stood slowly. I know you have no reason to trust me, Captain Morrison, but I'm asking you to be careful. These people have resources, connections, and no moral boundaries. They've already tried to destroy you professionally. Don't assume they'll stop there. The implication was clear. Catherine felt cold rage settle in her stomach. If you're suggesting they might try to harm me physically, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating a fact. Gerald Hutchins, the defense contractor who was arrested with Drummond, has connections to private security firms that have been investigated for illegal surveillance and intimidation. Marcus Reeves has been accused of bribing foreign officials and threatening whistleblowers. These aren't people who accept defeat gracefully. Catherine looked at Voss, who'd been standing silently by the door. Get this information to Ghost Protocol immediately. I want full background checks on everyone involved in the contractor network. And I want enhanced security measures implemented for all personnel involved in the Morrison Protocol. Already on it. Catherine turned back to the Chens. You've delivered your information. Now leave my base, and don't come back unless you're summoned to testify. Father and daughter stood together. As they reached the door, Lieutenant Chen paused. Ma'am, I know this doesn't change anything. I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know that I think about Maria every day. About the moment I should have overridden Brennan and pulled her out. About how she trusted us to keep her safe and we failed her. I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. Good, Katha, Catherine said flatly. You should. Maybe it'll keep you from destroying someone else's daughter. After they left, Catherine sat heavily in the conference room chair, the USB drive clutched in her hand. Voss sat beside her. You believe them. I believe they're scared. Whether that makes them trustworthy is another question. Catherine plugged the drive into her laptop, entering Maria's birth date with trembling fingers. The files that appeared were explosive. Detailed financial records showing systematic bribes to officers across Naval Special Warfare Command, Army Special Forces, and Air Force Special Operations. Email chains discussing strategies to undermine female candidates. Meeting notes from contractor executives planning how to capitalize on integration failures. And in a folder marked Insurance, there were audio recordings. Catherine clicked on the first one and heard Drummond's voice recorded in what sounded like a private meeting. We need the Morrison girl's death to look like a training accident. Clean, simple, no questions. The last thing we need is her mother digging into our operations. You know who Catherine Morrison is, right, Ghost Trident operator. If she starts investigating, she'll find everything. Another voice responded, male, gravelly, unfamiliar. Then make sure the investigation is airtight. Falsify the records if you have to. Pay off the medical examiner, whatever it takes. What about Brennan? He's the instructor who let her drown. He's unstable, might crack under pressure. Handle him. Promise him a promotion, a cushy assignment, whatever keeps him loyal. And if he talks, make him disappear. Catherine's hands were shaking so violently she could barely control the mouse. They'd known. From the very beginning, they'd known Maria's death wasn't an accident. They'd deliberately covered it up to prevent Catherine from investigating. Son of a bitch, she whispered. They killed her on purpose. Voss leaned over to look at the screen. Catherine, this is huge. This is conspiracy to commit murder. This changes everything. Play the rest of the recordings. I need to hear all of it. For the next hour, they listened to evidence of a conspiracy that stretched across multiple military branches and defense contractors. Plans to sabotage equipment, strategies to plant false evidence of female candidates' incompetence. Discussions of how to intimidate or bribe anyone who questioned the system. And throughout it all, Maria's name kept appearing. The contractors had identified her as a particular threat daughter of a legendary operator, smart, capable, likely to succeed and become a symbol of successful integration. They'd wanted her to fail, and when she'd persisted, they'd arranged for her to die. "I'm going to destroy them," Catherine said quietly. "Every single person on these recordings, every contractor, every officer, every person who knew what they were doing and stayed silent. I'm going to burn their world down around them. Catherine, don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me to follow proper channels. They murdered my daughter. They murdered her deliberately, systematically, as part of a calculated strategy to maintain their power and profits. There's no proper channel for this. There's only justice." Voss grabbed her arm. "Listen to me. I understand your rage. I would feel the same way. But if you go after these people without following proper legal procedures, you'll lose. They'll claim entrapment, prosecutorial misconduct, violations of their constitutional rights. They'll walk free and laugh about it. Is that what you want?" Catherine forced herself to breathe, to think tactically instead of emotionally. Voss was right. Rage wasn't enough. She needed to be smart, methodical, surgical in her approach. "You're right. We do this by the book. But we do it fast before they can destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses. Get the USB drive to the FBI immediately. I want federal warrants issued for everyone on those recordings. And I want protection details assigned to everyone who's testified against them." "What about you?" Captain Chen warned. "That you're a target." "I've been operating in hostile territory for 30 years. I think I can handle some angry defense contractors." "Catherine, this is serious. These people have resources, and I have something they don't. I have nothing left to lose. They already took my daughter. There's nothing else they can threaten me with." But Catherine was wrong about that, and she'd discover it the next morning when she arrived at the training grounds to find all 47 female candidates assembled in formation, with Master Chief Porter standing before them, looking grim. "What's going on?" Porter turned to her, his face grave. "We have a problem. Someone leaked the candidates' personal information online. Home addresses, family members' names, social media accounts. Within 3 hours, they started receiving death threats." Catherine felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. "How many received threats?" "All of them. And it's not just anonymous internet trolls. Some of the threats are specific, detailed. They mention family members by name. They describe daily routines. This is professional intimidation." Maya Torres stepped forward from the formation. "Ma'am, my younger brother received a message this morning. Someone sent him a photo of him walking to school. The message said, 'Your sister should quit training before something happens to your family.'" Gabriela Torres was next. "My parents' restaurant was vandalized last night. Someone spray-painted, 'Your daughters are going to get people killed' across the front windows." One by one, the candidates reported similar incidents. Threatening phone calls, suspicious vehicles outside family homes, online harassment campaigns. It was coordinated, systematic, designed to break their resolve by threatening the people they loved. Catherine felt rage and guilt war in her chest. These women were suffering because of her reforms, because she'd challenged a system that had no moral boundaries. She'd made them targets. "Listen to me," she said, raising her voice to address all 47 candidates. "I know you're scared. I know your families are scared. This is exactly what these people want, to make you quit through fear and intimidation. The question is, are you going to let them win?" "No, ma'am." The response was immediate and fierce. "Good. Because here's what's going to happen. The FBI is investigating these threats as federal crimes. Your families are going to receive protection details, and you're going to continue training knowing that every day you refuse to quit is a victory against the people who want to see you fail. Are you with me?" "Yes, ma'am." But as Catherine dismissed the formation and watched them return to their barracks, she felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. These weren't just candidates anymore. They were pawns in a much larger war, and she'd put them on the front lines without fully understanding the risks. Voss found her an hour later staring at her phone, where messages from concerned parents were piling up faster than she could read them. 3 families are threatening to pull their daughters from training. 2 more are demanding we provide private security for their entire families. And one father just told me if anything happens to his daughter, he's holding you personally responsible and will sue the Navy for wrongful death. Let him sue. I don't care about lawsuits. I care about keeping those women safe and completing their training. Catherine, you can't protect 47 candidates and their families from a coordinated intimidation campaign. You don't have the resources or authority. Then I'll find them. I'll call in every favor I'm owed from 30 years of operations. I'll leverage Ghost Protocol's network. I'll do whatever it takes. At what cost? You're running yourself into the ground. You're not sleeping, you're barely eating, and you're taking responsibility for things beyond your control. This is going to break you. Catherine laughed bitterly. I broke 3 years ago when they handed me my daughter's personal effects in a plastic bag. Everything since then has just been going through the motions. So don't worry about me breaking Elena. I've been broken. Now I'm just sharp pieces trying to cut anyone who gets too close. That's not healthy. That's not sustainable. And it's not going to honor Maria's memory if you destroy yourself in the process of avenging her. I'm not trying to avenge her. I'm trying to make sure no one else has to bury their daughter because of institutional corruption and cowardice. If that destroys me in the process, so be it. At least I'll go down fighting. Voss was about to respond when her phone rang. She listened for a moment, her face going pale. How bad, Jesus Christ. Okay, we're on our way. She looked at Catherine. That was base security. There's been an incident at the female barracks. Someone tried to break in through a ground floor window. The candidates fought them off, but one of the intruders was injured. He's in custody. They ran to the barracks where MPs were cordoning off the area and taking statements. Inside, Catherine found Maya Torres sitting on a bunk, her right hand wrapped in a bandage, her face set in grim satisfaction. Ma'am, I want to report that I successfully defended my quarters against an intruder. What happened? I was doing equipment maintenance when I heard glass breaking. I moved to investigate and found a man climbing through the window. He had a knife. I disarmed him using the close quarters combat techniques from training, then secured him until the MPs arrived. He's pretty banged up. Catherine felt pride and terror in equal measure. Were you injured? Cut on my hand from the knife. Nothing serious. I've had worse injuries during training. Torres, you did exactly what you were trained to do, but this shouldn't have happened in the first place. You should be safe in your own barracks. With respect, ma'am, no SEAL is ever completely safe. That's part of the job. And if these assholes think they can scare me into quitting by sending some amateur with a knife, they're dumber than I thought. The other candidates had gathered around, and Catherine saw the same determination in their faces. They weren't intimidated. They were angry, and that anger was hardening into steel resolve. Who wants to quit? Catherine asked bluntly. If this is too much, if the threats against your families are too much, you can withdraw with no prejudice. No one will think less of you. Not a single hand went up. Gabriela Torres spoke for them all. Ma'am, my family fled cartel violence in Mexico when I was 5. My parents built a restaurant from nothing while dealing with discrimination and financial struggle. They didn't run from threats then, and I'm not running now. If anything, this just proves how desperate these people are. They're losing, and they know it. The other candidates nodded in agreement. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but maybe the foundation that hope could be built on. All right. Then we increase security measures immediately. No one goes anywhere alone. Buddy system at all times. Windows get reinforced. Access to barracks is restricted, and we accelerate the training timeline. Accelerate. Reeves had arrived and was standing in the doorway. Catherine, they're already on an aggressive schedule. If we push them harder, they graduate sooner and become operational SEALs instead of vulnerable candidates. Right now, they're targets because they're in training. Once they graduate, they're protected by operational security protocols. We compress the remaining training from 5 months to 3. Can it be done? Reeves thought for a moment. It can be done if we eliminate rest days, extend training hours, and operate on a wartime acceleration schedule. But it's going to be brutal. Catherine turned to the candidates. You heard that. 3 months of the hardest training you've ever experienced. 15-hour days. No days off. Evolution's designed to break you physically and mentally. Some of you won't make it, but those who do will graduate as fully qualified SEALs, and that qualification will give you protections these people can't penetrate. Do you want that? Yes, ma'am? The response was immediate and unanimous. Then get some rest tonight. Tomorrow morning, everything changes. Dismissed. As the candidates dispersed, Porter pulled Catherine aside. You know this is exactly what they want, right? They're forcing you to push these women beyond reasonable limits, and when some of them fail or get injured, they'll claim it proves women can't handle SEAL training. I know, but the alternative is dragging out the training for 5 more months while they're vulnerable to intimidation and attack. At least this way we control the timeline. Or you're playing right into their hands. Maybe, but I'd rather risk failure on my terms than guarantee it on theirs. That night, Catherine barely slept. She lay in her quarters staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision she'd made since Maria's death. Every choice that had led to this moment. Every compromise, every sacrifice, every burned bridge. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You should have let it go. Now people are going to get hurt and it's your fault. Catherine deleted the message without responding and tried to sleep. But when she finally drifted off, she dreamed of Maria drowning, of her daughter's face beneath dark water, calling for help that never came. She woke at 3 a.m, gasping and covered in sweat, and realized that no matter how many reforms she implemented or how many corrupt officers she arrested, she'd never stop seeing that image. Never stop hearing her daughter's voice calling for rescue. The only question was whether she'd break before the reforms succeeded, or whether she could hold herself together long enough to see them through. And as dawn broke over Coronado, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Catherine honestly didn't know the answer. 3 months became 91 days of controlled chaos. Catherine watched the candidates transform from nervous recruits into hardened operators each day, stripping away another layer of doubt until only competence remained. The accelerated timeline pushed everyone to their breaking point, but that was exactly where SEALs were forged. On day 37, 5 candidates dropped out. Catherine personally processed each withdrawal, looking each woman in the eye and asking the same question: are you quitting because you can't or because you're choosing to? 4 admitted they'd reached their physical limits. Catherine respected that. The 5th, a 28-year-old from Texas, said something different. Ma'am, I'm quitting because my daughter is 6 years old and she's been having nightmares since the threats started. She wakes up crying, asking if mommy is going to die like the lady on TV died. I can't put her through this anymore. Catherine felt that particular knife twist deeper than the others. You're making the right choice for your family. That takes more courage than finishing training. Does it? Because it feels like I'm letting you down, letting Maria down, letting every woman who comes after me down. You're not. You're being a mother. That's the most important job you'll ever have. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Catherine pulled an envelope from her desk. This is a letter of recommendation. When your daughter is older, if you want to try again, call me. I'll make sure you get a slot. The woman left crying, and Catherine added her name to the list of people she'd failed. The list was getting long, but 42 candidates remained, and they were becoming something extraordinary. Catherine watched Torres' both sisters excel beyond even her expectations. Maya was a natural leader, the kind of person others followed into danger without hesitation. Gabriella had a tactical mind that rivaled operators with 10 years of experience. Together, they were becoming the proof that the Morrison Protocol worked. On day 53, the FBI made its move. Simultaneous arrests across 4 states, 17 defense contractor executives, 9 military officers, 3 congressional staffers. The conspiracy that Captain Chen's evidence had exposed was being systematically dismantled. Catherine was in the middle of observing a combat training evolution when Voss called with the news. They got Hutchins trying to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands. Reeves was arrested at his office, and the prosecutors found evidence of similar corruption in Army Special Forces and Air Force Special Tactics. This is going to be the biggest military corruption scandal since Tailhook. Good. Let it burn. Let everyone see what happens when people value profit over lives. Catherine, you need to prepare for what comes next. Congressional testimony, media interviews, probably a book deal. I'm not writing a book. I'm not doing interviews. I'm finishing this training cycle, and then I'm disappearing back into whatever shadows will still have me. You can't disappear. You're the face of military reform now. People are going to want to hear from you. Then they're going to be disappointed. This isn't about me. It never was. But Voss was right about the attention. By day 60, Catherine couldn't walk across base without reporters shouting questions from beyond the fence line. News helicopters circled overhead trying to capture footage of the training. Talk shows debated whether the Morrison Protocol was revolutionary or reckless. And through it all, Catherine kept her head down and focused on the 42 women who were still fighting to earn their tridents. On day 71, disaster nearly struck again. During a night water operation, one of the candidates, a 32-year-old from Oregon named Rebecca Santos, got disoriented in the dark and started to panic. Catherine watched from the safety boat, her heart in her throat, remembering Maria's final moments beneath the water. But this time, the system worked. The instructors noticed immediately. The safety divers were in the water within seconds. Santos was pulled out, treated for mild hypothermia, and after medical clearance was back in training the next day. That's the difference, Porter said, standing beside Catherine as they watched Santos complete her makeup evolution. 3 years ago, your daughter signaled for help and was ignored. Today, Santos started to struggle and half a dozen people moved to save her. That's what you built. That's Maria's legacy. Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The system had worked. A woman had been in danger, and instead of dismissing her concerns or letting her drown to prove she was weak, trained professionals had responded appropriately. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough, but it was something. On day 84, Catherine received word that Brennan had broken. Faced with the overwhelming evidence from Captain Chen's recordings and the testimony of 11 witnesses, he'd accepted a plea deal. 20 years in military prison in exchange for full cooperation in identifying other officers involved in the conspiracy. He wants to speak with you, Voss told her. Says he has information that doesn't appear in any of the official records. I don't want to hear anything he has to say. Catherine, he specifically mentioned Maria. Said there are things about her death that you don't know. Every fiber of Catherine's being screamed to refuse. She didn't want to hear Brennan's excuses, his justifications, his attempts to minimize his role in her daughter's death. But the operator in her knew that intelligence was intelligence regardless of the source. Set it up, but I want it recorded and I want you there as a witness. 3 days later, Catherine sat across from Jake Brennan in a federal detention facility. He looked nothing like the confident, cruel man who'd mocked her in the officers' club. His shoulders were hunched, his face gaunt, his eyes haunted by whatever demons he'd been wrestling with in solitary confinement. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I didn't come for you. I came for information. So talk. Brennan took a deep breath. Maria was the best candidate I ever trained. I need you to know that. She was stronger, smarter, more determined than 90% of the male candidates, and that terrified me. Why? Because if she succeeded, it proved everything I believed about women in combat was wrong. I'd spent my entire career convinced that women would weaken the teams, that integration was political correctness, destroying military readiness. Maria was proof that I was wrong, and I couldn't accept that. So you killed her. I didn't kill her, but I let her die, which is the same thing. Brennan's voice broke. When she signaled for help during that dive, I saw it. Of course I saw it. But I convinced myself she was just being dramatic, that she needed to push through the discomfort. By the time I admitted something was really wrong, it was too late. Catherine felt rage and grief churning in her stomach. You watched my daughter drown because your ego was more important than her life. Yes. And I've had 3 months in here to understand what that makes me. Not just a bad officer. Not just someone who made a mistake. A murderer. Because I chose my pride over her life and she died because of that choice. Why are you telling me this? You want forgiveness. Absolution. You're not getting it. I don't want forgiveness. I want you to know that Maria fought. Right up until the end, she fought. The medical examiner's report said she was unconscious when they pulled her out, but that's not true. I saw her eyes. She was aware. She was looking at me, and I could see in her face that she knew I'd let her die. The last thing your daughter experienced was the realization that someone she trusted had betrayed her. Catherine lunged across the table, only Voss's quick reflexes preventing her from getting her hands around Brennan's throat. Guards rushed in, but Brennan didn't move, didn't try to defend himself. "I deserve that," he said. "I deserve whatever you want to do to me, but I had to tell you the truth. Maria didn't just die. She was murdered by my cowardice and pride. And every day I spend in prison won't be enough to pay for that." Catherine was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Voss guided her out of the room and into the hallway where she collapsed against the wall. He looked her in the eyes and let her die. He saw her drowning and chose to do nothing. What kind of monster does that? The kind that's going to spend the next 20 years thinking about it every single day. That's not justice, but it's something. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But as Catherine drove back to Coronado, she realized that Brennan's confession had given her something she didn't expect. Certainty. For 3 years, she'd wondered if Maria's death could have been prevented if there was some scenario where her daughter might have survived. Now she knew. Maria had died because someone chose to let her die. There was no gray area, no ambiguity, just clear, simple murder disguised as negligence. And that clarity, horrible as it was, gave Catherine the strength to finish what she'd started. On day 91, the 42 remaining candidates stood in formation for their final evaluation. 3 months of brutal training had transformed them into something remarkable. They moved with the precision of experienced operators. They thought tactically, responded decisively, trusted each other completely. They were ready. Catherine stood before them, Porter and Reeves flanking her, and delivered the speech she'd been composing for 3 years. 91 days ago, you were candidates. Civilians with potential. Today you're SEALs. Not because I lowered the standards, not because I gave you special treatment, but because you met every challenge, exceeded every expectation, and proved that competence has no gender. You've earned the right to wear the Trident, and no one, not the contractors who tried to intimidate you, not the officers who bet against you, not the culture that told you women don't belong, can ever take that away from you. She paused, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. My daughter never got to stand where you're standing. She never got to graduate, never got to prove what she was capable of, never got to become the operator I know she would have been. But you're standing here because she died. You're SEALs because her death exposed a system that had to be torn down and rebuilt. That's her legacy. That's what her life and her death accomplished. And I need you to honor that by being better than the people who came before you, by mentoring the women who come after you, by never ever letting cruelty replace competence or prejudice replace professionalism. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. The response echoed across the training grounds. Then let's make it official. Tomorrow morning you graduate. Tomorrow afternoon you're operational. And tomorrow night you're going to celebrate becoming the first class of female SEALs trained under the Morrison Protocol. Dismissed. The formation broke, and the candidates erupted in celebration. Catherine watched them hug each other, cry together, share the moment they'd earned through 3 months of sacrifice and determination. Torres, both sisters, found Catherine in the chaos. Ma'am, we just wanted to say thank you for believing in us, for giving us this chance, for making this possible. Don't thank me. Thank Maria. She's the one who paid the price for your success. Then we'll honor her by being worthy of it, Gabriella said. Every mission, every operation, every time we put on this uniform, we'll remember what it cost. That night, Catherine returned to her quarters and finally allowed herself to feel something other than rage and determination. She felt pride. She felt satisfaction. She felt grief, but it was a different kind of grief now. Not the raw bleeding wound of 3 years ago, but something that had begun to scar over. Not healed, never healed, but at least not actively killing her anymore. Her phone rang. Admiral Chen's name appeared on the screen. Captain Morrison, I've been reviewing the final evaluation reports. 42 graduates out of 47 starters. That's an 89% completion rate. Do you know what the average completion rate is for male SEAL candidates? Approximately 75%, ma'am. Exactly. Your female candidates outperformed the historical average by 14 percentage points. And they did it in 3 months instead of 6. That's not just success, Captain. That's triumph. Effective immediately, the Morrison Protocol is being implemented at every SEAL training facility in the United States. You've changed the institution forever. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. It shouldn't have taken my daughter's death to make this happen. No, it shouldn't have. But it did. And now you get to decide what happens next. Do you want to stay at Coronado and oversee the next training cycle? Or would you prefer a different assignment? I want to go back to Ghost Protocol operations. I want to disappear back into the shadows where I belong. Denied. You're too valuable as a public figure now. The female candidates need someone they can look up to, someone who represents what they're fighting for. I'm assigning you as Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare with specific responsibility for integrated training programs. You'll oversee implementation of the Morrison Protocol across all facilities, mentor female operators, and serve as the public face of SEAL reform. Catherine wanted to refuse to insist that she wasn't meant for leadership roles or public attention. But she thought about Maya and Gabriela Torres, about the 42 women who'd trusted her to keep them safe, about the thousands of women who would come after them. Understood, ma'am. I accept the assignment. Good. Your promotion ceremony is scheduled for next week. Your first official duty will be presenting tridents to your graduating class. I expect you to make it memorable. The call ended. Catherine sat in silence, processing the fact that her life had fundamentally changed. She'd entered Ghost Protocol 30 years ago to serve in the shadows. Now she was being dragged into the light, whether she wanted it or not. The graduation ceremony took place on a bright California morning with media cameras capturing every moment. Catherine stood on the platform in her dress uniform, newly promoted to captain, with her own hard-earned trident gleaming on her chest. Beside her were Admiral Chen, Master Chief Porter, and Sergeant Major Reeves, the team that had made the Morrison Protocol possible. One by one, the 42 graduates came forward to receive their tridents. Catherine pinned each one personally, looking each woman in the eye and saying the same words, "You earned this. Now go prove they were wrong about us." When Maya Torres stepped forward, Catherine hesitated before pinning the trident. "Your sister Gabriela told me something after your final evaluation. She said Maria would be proud of what we've accomplished. I hope she's right. I hope my daughter is somewhere watching this, knowing that her death wasn't meaningless. She's watching, ma'am, and she's proud. I'm certain of it." After the ceremony, as the graduates posed for photos with their families, Catherine slipped away to the base cemetery. She'd arranged for a memorial stone to be placed there, even though Maria was buried at Arlington. It was a small granite marker with her daughter's name dates and a simple inscription, "She died so others could live." That was always enough. Catherine knelt beside the stone, finally allowing herself to speak directly to her daughter for the first time since the funeral. "I did it, baby. I got them. Every single person who hurt you, who covered up what happened, who valued their careers over your life. They're all paying for it now. And I built something in your name, something that's going to save lives and change the world. I know you can't hear me. I know you're gone. But I needed to tell you anyway. I needed you to know that your death meant something, that you mattered, that I never stopped fighting for you." She placed her hand on the stone, feeling the warmth of the sun-heated granite. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I trusted a system that didn't deserve that trust. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. But I promise you this, every woman who graduates from SEAL training from now on is graduating because you didn't. Every life saved by the Morrison Protocol is a life saved because you died. That's your legacy, Maria, and it's going to outlive both of us." Catherine heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Admiral Chen standing respectfully back, waiting to be acknowledged. "I'll give you privacy, Captain." "No need, ma'am. I was just finishing." Catherine stood brushing dirt from her knees. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to tell you something personally before it becomes public knowledge. The Morrison Protocol is being renamed. Effective immediately, it's being called the Maria Morrison Integrated Training Standard. Every female candidate who graduates under this protocol will know your daughter's name and understand what she sacrificed." Catherine's throat tightened. That's more than I expected. Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me. Thank your daughter for being brave enough to try, and thank yourself for being strong enough to turn tragedy into transformation. Not many people could have done what you did. I didn't have a choice. When your daughter dies, you either fall apart or you fight. I just chose to fight. And in fighting, you changed the military forever. That matters, Catherine. More than you know. Over the following months, Catherine watched the Maria Morrison Integrated Training Standards spread across the military. Army Special Forces adopted modified versions. Air Force Special Tactics implemented similar reforms. Even Marine Corps Special Operations Command began revising their protocols. The cultural shift was slow, painful, meeting resistance at every turn. But it was happening. 1 year after that first night in the officers' club, Catherine stood on the same spot where Brennan had humiliated her. The space had been converted into a training center dedicated to Maria's memory. On the wall was a photograph of Catherine's daughter in her training gear, smiling with the confidence of someone who believed the system would protect her. Beneath the photograph was the quote that had become the motto of every female SEAL candidate. She died so others could live. That was always enough. Catherine traced her fingers over the words, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The arrests, the trials, the reforms, the graduates. 42 women in the first class, 67 in the second, 93 preparing to start the third cycle. The numbers were growing proof that the Morrison Protocol worked, but none of it brought Maria back. None of it filled the void left by her daughter's absence. Catherine had saved countless lives, transformed an institution, created lasting change. And she was still just a mother who'd lost her daughter. Torres Maya. Torres, now a fully operational SEAL, found Catherine standing in front of the memorial. "Ma'am, we're shipping out tomorrow. First all-female SEAL team deployment in history. Just wanted you to know before we left." "Where are you going?" "Can't say, but it's the kind of mission that Maria would have been perfect for. We'll be thinking of her. Keep your head down. Trust your training. And remember that you're not just representing yourselves. You're representing every woman who comes after you. We know, ma'am, and we won't let you down. We won't let Maria down." After Torres left, Catherine remained in front of the memorial alone with her thoughts. She'd spent 3 years fighting for justice, and she'd won. The corrupt officers were in prison. The defense contractors were facing federal charges. The system had been reformed from the ground up. By any objective measure, she'd succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. But standing there in the gathering twilight, looking at her daughter's photograph, Catherine finally understood something she'd been avoiding for 3 years. Success wasn't the same as healing. Justice wasn't the same as peace. She'd changed the world, but she hadn't changed the fundamental truth that her daughter was dead and never coming back. And maybe that was okay. Maybe grief wasn't something to be fixed or overcome. Maybe it was just something to carry day after day, finding ways to transform it into something that honored the person you'd lost, rather than letting it consume you. Catherine pulled out her phone and opened the last text Maria had sent her, the one she'd kept for 3 years. "Mom, I'm nervous about today's exercise. The instructors are pushing really hard, but I'm not going to quit. I'm going to make you proud. Love you." For 3 years, Catherine had been unable to respond. Now finally, she typed a reply that would never be read, but needed to be written anyway. "You already made me proud, baby girl. Every day of your life, you made me proud. And now 3 years after you're gone, you're still making me proud. Because 42 women graduated today because you died. Because hundreds more will graduate in the years to come. Because the system that killed you can never kill anyone else. That's what your life accomplished. That's what your death achieved. And I promise you, I will spend every day I have left making sure your sacrifice meant something. I love you, Maria. I will always love you. And I will never stop fighting for the women you saved by dying. That's my promise to you. That's my legacy to honor yours." She hit send, knowing the message would disappear into the digital void, another prayer cast into an empty sky. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd said it. What mattered was that she'd finally acknowledged both her grief and her triumph, her loss, and her victory. Catherine Morrison had walked into the officers' club 6 months ago as a broken woman playing the role of a weak one. She'd been mocked, humiliated, dismissed as irrelevant. And then she'd revealed who she really was. A mother transformed into an avenging angel, an operator turned reformer, a woman who'd taken the worst thing that could happen to her and forged it into something that would save countless lives. The small woman in the royal blue blouse, who'd trembled under Brennan's contempt, was gone. In her place stood Captain Catherine Morrison, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare, architect of the most comprehensive military reform in decades, and mother of the woman whose death had changed everything. The Trident tattoo on her back, the Ghost Trident that marked her as one of 12 legendary operators, had once been her proudest achievement. Now it was just a reminder of who she'd been before Maria died. Her real mark, her real legacy was written in the lives of women who would never die the way her daughter had. Written in the reforms that bore Maria's name. Written in the promise that no mother would have to bury her daughter because a system valued pride over competence. Catherine took one last look at Maria's photograph, touching the frame gently. "Sleep well, baby. Your work here is done. Mine is just beginning. But I promise you this, I will never let them forget what you sacrificed. I will never let them diminish what you achieved. And I will never ever stop fighting to make sure your death was the last time the system chose cruelty over conscience. That's my promise to you, Maria. And it's a promise I will keep until the day I die." She walked out of the memorial center into the California evening, leaving her daughter's photograph behind, but carrying her daughter's legacy forward. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. But for the first time in 3 years, Catherine Morrison felt like she could breathe without drowning in grief. The small woman in the royal blue blouse had been mocked for her weakness. But she'd shown them what real strength looked like. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to transform pain into purpose, loss into legacy, and one woman's death into thousands of women's lives saved. And that strength, forged in grief and tempered in battle, would never break again. Word count 5. 398 words, retry.